My mother-in-law poured something strange into my drink when she thought I wasn't looking. Special cocktail for my favorite son-in-law, she said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. I smiled back, thanked her, and discreetly switched glasses with her husband. Gerald, who always mocked my career, barely looked up from his phone before taking a sip. 45 minutes later, he was pale, sweating, and stumbling to the bathroom. My name is Julian Mercer. I'm 32, independent photographer based in Asheville, North Carolina. I built this life from scratch: weddings, wildlife, magazine spreads. Not just passion work, work that pays the bills. The kind of work that matters if you're good at it, and I am. But to my in-laws, especially Diane, what I do has never been enough. "How's the little photography hobby?" Gerald would ask at family dinners, grinning with condescension. He was an investment banker, the type who saw success in terms of square footage and stock portfolios. I was an artist. I didn't fit his mold. Every Sunday dinner felt like a chore. Diane fluttering around her daughter like a protective swan. Gerald treating me like a failed applicant he was forced to tolerate. My wife Haley would squeeze my hand under the table, silently apologizing for them. I always brushed it off. The night of Diane's birthday, I had just returned from a week in Montana. I'd been on assignment photographing bison in the snow for National Geographic. Windburned, exhausted, and just wanting to sleep for a week. But Haley had insisted. "It's just a couple hours," she promised. I ignored the knot in my stomach. I wish I hadn't. We met 6 years ago at an art exhibition. My work was hanging on the wall. She was finishing her master's in environmental science. We connected instantly. She loved how I captured the world through a lens. I admired how she wanted to protect it. Her parents were a different story. From the very beginning, Gerald made it clear he had hoped for someone safer. A man with a pension, a desk, a 401k. Someone more like him. Diane at least was subtle. She'd compliment my work while asking when I planned to settle down. When at family functions, she introduced me as the photographer instead of her son-in-law. For years, I tried to win them over. I brought expensive wines, showed them published work, casually dropped the names of high-profile clients. It didn't matter. They saw me as temporary, a phase Haley would grow out of. Last Christmas, I overheard Diane on the phone. "Haley could have married Thomas, you know, orthopedic surgeon, family money, but she chose the creative one." She said creative like it was a diagnosis. Gerald wasn't any better. When Haley and I told them we were trying for a baby, he pulled me aside. "Children are expensive, son. Maybe get a real job before you bring one into the world." I never told Haley. She loved her parents despite their flaws. I didn't want to force her into some impossible choice. So I smiled. I shook Gerald's hand, complimented Diane's casserole, and swallowed every insult. But the signs were always there. Diane pulling Haley into the kitchen whenever I shared a career win, accidentally excluding me from family photos. Gerald suggesting Haley see a therapist for her impulsive choices while staring directly at me. I ignored it all. I kept hoping time would thaw their judgment. I was wrong. That Friday, Diane's birthday dinner started the same way as always. Gerald bragged about closing some deal. Diane fussed over the place settings. Haley's brother Owen and his wife Vanessa asked about my latest shoot. I drank a beer, counted the minutes. After dinner, Diane stood up and said, "I made my famous sangria for dessert." She vanished into the kitchen. I offered to help. That's when I saw it. She had 2 glasses set aside, separate from the others. As I entered, she quickly dropped something into one, a clear liquid from a tiny vial, not garnish, not flavoring. Her hands trembled slightly as she tucked it away. "Oh, Julian, I've got this," she said too brightly. "This one's for you. Special recipe." The surface of the drink shimmered, a thin, almost invisible film catching the light. "Let me help you carry these," I said, casually picking up both glasses. Back at the table, I placed the tampered one in front of Gerald. He didn't even notice. I claimed I wanted water with dessert and sat back to watch. Within 45 minutes, Gerald was drenched in sweat, stumbling from the table. We could hear him retching down the hall. "Food poisoning," Diane said, pale and stunned. "Must have been bad shellfish," she added, almost to herself. I didn't say a word. I just ate my chocolate cake while Haley rushed after her father. But I pocketed the untouched glass, Something had shifted inside me. It wasn't fury. It wasn't even shock. It was clarity. Cold. Focused. This wasn't something I could let go. But I also wasn't going to fight them on their terms. I was going to expose them exactly as they were. The Monday after, I took the glass to an old client of mine, Jason, a chemist who ran a toxicology lab. Personal or professional, and he asked. Family, I replied. 3 days later, he called. There were benzodiazepines in that drink, he said. Nothing fatal, but strong enough to knock someone out, maybe even cause memory loss. He paused. Where'd you get it? I need a written report, I said, and I need it to be bulletproof. That night, I told Haley I wanted to skip Sunday dinners for a while, said I had to prepare for an upcoming exhibition. She looked disappointed but nodded. She didn't know the half of it. I wasn't ready to tell her the truth yet. I needed more proof, and I was going to find it. Over the next 2 weeks, I did what I do best, gathered evidence. It turns out Diane had a long history with prescription medications. 3 separate doctors had written her prescriptions for Xanax. She'd been overlapping doses for years, doubling, tripling, mixing with wine. I also started hearing whispers around town, small stories that never made it to Haley. An incident at a neighbor's party, missing jewelry at the country club, a screaming match in a parking lot. The kind of stories that polite people don't talk about, but don't forget either. I kept a journal, screenshots, printouts, a folder labeled, "For Haley," and I waited. The opportunity came when Haley told me, "My mom wants new photos for her social media. She specifically asked if you'd take them." I nearly laughed. "Oh, really?" I said, pretending to be surprised. "She said she wants to modernize her image." Haley shrugged. "I think she's trying." She had no idea. I agreed, of course. The following Saturday, I arrived at Diane's house alone, camera bag in one hand, a sealed manila envelope in the other. Diane greeted me in full performance mode, hair perfect, makeup flawless, designer scarf over her shoulders. "Gerald's at the office," she said. "We'll have the house to ourselves." "Perfect," I replied. Before she could strike a pose, I handed her the envelope. "What's this?" "Thought you should see it before we start," I said quietly. Inside was the toxicology report, a list of her overlapping prescriptions, and a few carefully chosen screenshots, neighbors gossiping, doctors' names, party incidents. Her hands trembled as she flipped through the pages. "This is absurd," she whispered. "I would never—" "We both know what happened," I interrupted. "What I don't know is why." She stared at me. Then her expression changed, hard, cold, truthful. "Because you're not good enough for my daughter," she snapped. "You never were. A man provides stability, not pictures," she continued. "You think love is enough? What happens when your little art business dries up? You think Haley won't resent that?" "And drugging me helps?" I asked, keeping my tone steady. "It wasn't to hurt you," she hissed, "just to make you miss your stupid gallery opening. Prove to Haley that you're unreliable, that you're a flake." I nodded slowly. "Well," I said, "mission failed." She folded her arms. "So now what? You going to show Haley all this?" "No," I said, "not unless I have to." She blinked. "Here's what's going to happen," I continued. "You're going to tell Gerald what you did. And then both of you are going to start treating me with respect." Her laugh was sharp, hollow. "Haley would never believe you over us." I picked up my camera bag. "Maybe not, but she'll believe a toxicology report, prescription records, the neighbors you alienated, the country club." Her mouth opened, closed. I turned and walked out. I never took a single photo. That night, Diane called Haley in tears. She claimed I'd been inappropriate during the photo shoot, that I'd been aggressive and rude. Haley was confused, hurt, confronted me gently. I told her everything. I showed her the lab report, the prescriptions, even the texts her mom had sent over the years, messages that, in hindsight, felt increasingly hostile. "My mom wouldn't do this," she said again and again, but her voice cracked with uncertainty. The next day, she went to her parents' house alone. When she came back, her eyes were red. She looked like she'd aged a year. "My dad says, it's all a misunderstanding," she said quietly, "that you're trying to drive a wedge between me and my family, because you're insecure." I nodded. "What do you think?" I asked. She didn't answer. She just crawled into bed and turned away from me. For the next 2 weeks, we barely spoke. Haley went to her parents' house, came back with new doubts. Red-rimmed eyes, long silences. I threw myself into work editing, traveling, late nights in the studio, waiting for something to break. Then one day a package arrived. No return address. Inside was a USB stick and a handwritten note. "You should see this. Vanessa." Haley is sisters-in-law. I plugged the drive into my laptop, security footage. Dozens of files, all time-stamped, all from Gerald and Diane's home. The first video showed Diane in the kitchen, adding something to a drink. My drink. The second showed me walking in, taking the glasses, switching them. Then Gerald, sipping the sangria. The video confirmed everything. But it wasn't over. There was more footage, from after we left. Diane screaming at Gerald, furious. "You drank the wrong one," she shouted. "It's not my fault," Gerald bellowed back. "This isn't the first time you've done something like this." I watched that clip 3 times. They knew. They'd done it before. Another clip, 2 days later. Diane and Gerald arguing again. "He knows," Gerald said. "So what?" Diane snapped. "It's his word against mine. Haley won't believe him." "She might," Gerald said, "especially if we keep pushing." "I've already started," Diane said, smiling coldly. "Planted seeds. About their marriage. About Julian's temper. Give it a few more weeks. She'll think divorce was her own idea." I shut the laptop. My hands were shaking. This wasn't just about me anymore. They weren't just trying to break up our marriage. They were trying to rewrite it. I called Vanessa. "Why did you send this to me?" I asked. There was a long pause. "Because they did the same thing to me," she said quietly. "When I married Owen, they tried to ruin us. Said I wasn't good enough. Gerald even called my father and suggested I was lying about my past." "Why didn't you tell us?" "Owen doesn't know," she whispered. "He worships his father. I tried to warn him, but he thought I was paranoid. I couldn't watch them do it to you too." The next morning, Gerald sent me a text. "We should talk, man to man. No wives." I agreed. We met at his country club. He ordered a bourbon, smiled like nothing was wrong. "Families are complicated," he began. "My wife, she's intense, but she loves her daughter. She means well." "Drugging someone means well?" I asked. He waved dismissively. "A misunderstanding. Diane takes anxiety meds. Maybe she mixed up the glasses." "I have the footage, Gerald." His face changed, cold, hard. "What do you want? Money? Is that it?" "No," I said. "I want you to leave us alone. Stop planting doubts. Stop undermining my marriage." He laughed. "You think you're the first guy to go up against us? You think you're the first mistake Haley's made?" He leaned forward. "Ask her about Thomas, the fiancé before you." I stared at him. "Haley was engaged before me?" Gerald smirked. "Nice guy. Doctor. We didn't like his background. Took us 6 months to convince her he was cheating. Planted some evidence. She came home crying." "History repeats," he said. On the drive home, I called Bethany, Haley's college roommate. She went quiet when I asked about Thomas. "That was rough," she said. "Her parents didn't like him. Started rumors. Said he was cheating. Haley believed them." "He wasn't?" "No," Bethany said. "He loved her. He tried to explain, but by the time she listened, the damage was done." I hung up. The pattern was clear now. It wasn't just me. It never had been. I didn't confront Haley that night. Not yet. Instead, I started piecing together the truth. Every detail, every lie. I reached out to Thomas. At first, he didn't want to talk, understandably. But once I explained what Diane and Gerald had done to me, his tone changed. He sent over old emails, texts, proof of how they'd manipulated Haley, made her believe things that weren't true, things that destroyed their relationship. Then I contacted some of Haley's old friends, people she'd once been close with, but who had gradually disappeared from her life. Each one had a story. They all followed the same script. Encourage Haley to be independent. You're pushed out. Question her parents' behavior. You're labeled toxic. Disagree with Gerald. You're never invited back. It was methodical, calculated, chilling. I didn't just collect these stories, I documented them. Screenshots, messages. More footage from Vanessa. Conversations between Gerald and Diane filmed quietly from corners of rooms they assumed were private. In one video, Gerald said, "Once they divorce, we'll convince her to move back in. She can help run the foundation. Meet someone suitable." Diane replied, "And she'll thank us for it, in time." They weren't parents, they were architects designing every move in their children's lives. I compiled everything into a single drive. Then one night over dinner, I invited Owen and Vanessa to our house. Haley didn't know why. I didn't tell her. Not until dessert. I connected my laptop to the TV, took a deep breath. "There's something you both need to see." For the next hour, we watched the drugging footage, the arguments, the plans to break us up, the conversations about Thomas, about control, about using Eliza, our unborn child, as leverage. Haley sat frozen, her face pale, eyes wide. Owen kept shaking his head, saying, "That's not my parents, that's not them." But it was. When the last clip ended, silence filled the room. Haley turned to me with tears rolling down her cheeks. "Why didn't you tell me all of this sooner?" I looked at her gently. "Because I needed you to see it. All of it. Not just what they did to me. What they've done to you. To Owen. Your whole life." Owen stood up angry, defensive. "These videos, they've been edited. This isn't fair. You're twisting things." Vanessa touched his arm. "They did it to us too, Owen. You know they did." He pulled away. "No, you never said anything." "I tried," she whispered, "but you wouldn't listen." Owen looked at the TV again, then down at his hands. Everything was crumbling. That night, Haley barely spoke. She held me close, tighter than she had in weeks. In the dark, she whispered, "I believe you. I'm sorry I doubted you." I nodded. "I love you." The next morning, Diane called. I put the phone on speaker. "Darling," she chirped, "your father and I were thinking, maybe you should come stay with us for a few weeks. Just some space. Give you time to think." Haley didn't hesitate. "Mom," she said, "I've seen the videos." There was silence. "What? Videos?" "The footage. Of you drugging Julian's drink. Of you and Dad talking about breaking us up." More silence. "Whatever he's shown you," Diane said, recovering quickly, "it's been manipulated. You know Julian has always been jealous of our family. He wants to drive a wedge." "Stop," Haley said. Her voice was calm, firm, unshakable. "We're coming over tonight. All of us, Owen, Vanessa, Julian, and me. And we're going to talk. As a family, no more lies." She hung up. That evening we returned to Gerald and Diane's house. But this time I didn't come empty-handed. Tripod, camera, external mic, all set up in the living room. Gerald raised an eyebrow as I unpacked. "I understand there's been a misunderstanding," he began. "No misunderstanding," I interrupted. "This is a family discussion, and I'm documenting it." Diane gasped. "You can't just record us." "Yes," I said, "I can. You've documented every part of Haley's life without her consent. This one's mine." For the next 2 hours, we laid everything out. The drink, the manipulation. Thomas, the web of lies spun over years. Gerald and Diane denied everything, called me unstable, said I had an agenda. Each time they denied, I hit play on another clip. Each lie met with footage. Each dismissal answered by proof. Finally, Haley stood up. Her hands trembled. "I love you both," she said. "But what you've done is not love. It's control. It's abuse. You don't get to decide who I love or how I live." Gerald looked stunned, like his world had shifted. Owen added, "We're adults. We choose our own paths." Diane broke down crying, not from guilt, from the realization that she was losing. As we left, I handed Gerald a small USB drive. He looked at it suspiciously. "What's this?" "Everything," I said. "The videos, the emails, the testimonies. Yours to keep." "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means I'm not going to ruin your reputation. I could, but I won't. That would hurt Haley, and I'd never do that." I paused. "But if you ever interfere again, if you ever come near our marriage with more lies, copies go to everyone you care about. Your club, your partners, your clients." For the first time, Gerald looked at me with something real, something close to respect. I underestimated you. I nodded. Yes, you did. 6 months passed. Haley and Owen started therapy, working through years of manipulation. Diane and Gerald kept their distance. No apologies, but no interference either. Then around the holidays, an invitation arrived. A fresh start. Dinner at their house. Haley wanted to go. They're still my parents, she said, and they're trying. I agreed, but I wasn't naive. That night, the table was full. Laughter, wine, chatter. Diane was gracious. Gerald asked about my latest project. And then after dinner, he invited me into his study. I have a proposition, he said, pouring bourbon. Here it comes, I thought. I've been thinking about your career, Gerald said, his tone smooth, rehearsed. Photography's worked out well for you, but have you considered diversifying? I raised an eyebrow. Diversifying? He sipped his bourbon. I could bring you into my firm, junior partner track. You're sharp, articulate, and you've proven resourceful. The salary would be substantial. I didn't even touch the glass he poured me. Why would you do that? Because you're family, he said, smiling, and I respect how you handled the unpleasantness. You protected Haley, stood your ground. That's what a man does. I set the glass down, untouched. I appreciate the offer, but no. His smile wavered. Julian, be reasonable. This is an olive branch, a way for us to move forward. No, Gerald, it's not. It's another attempt at control. You're offering me a leash with a fancier collar. His face darkened. The mask slipped. Everyone has a price. I stood up. And that's why you'll never understand your daughter. She's not a transaction. And neither am I. I left him sitting there with his scotch and his scheming. Back in the dining room, Diane was flipping through old photo albums with Haley, trying too hard to look maternal. You were so happy when you lived at home, she was saying, holding up a picture. Haley caught my eye. I gave her a small nod. Her expression shifted. She stood. Mom, Dad, I have something to tell you. Everyone turned to listen. We're having a baby, Julian and I. I'm 3 months pregnant. The silence that followed was dense, thick with unspoken expectations crashing down. Diane recovered first. Oh, darling. She rushed forward, teary-eyed, trying to embrace her. Gerald approached slower, his congratulations stiff. Thank you, I said calmly. Then I leaned in closer to Gerald, voice low. This child will never be a pawn in your games, I promise you that. He didn't answer, but his face said everything. 3 weeks later, a certified letter arrived from Gerald's attorney. Inside were legal documents. 1, the deed to our house transferred to our name. No strings. 2, a trust fund for our unborn child, substantial, airtight, irrevocable. There was no note, no call, just action. It wasn't an apology. Gerald wasn't capable of that, but it was an acknowledgement. His way of saying, I lost, you won. Our daughter was born in the summer. We named her Eliza after my grandmother. When Diane and Gerald came to the hospital, they were polite, cautious, respectful. They brought gifts. They smiled for photos. But they didn't offer advice. They didn't overstep. For once, they acted like guests, not overlords. Weeks passed, then months. We established boundaries, and to their credit, they honored them. No uninvited visits, no backhanded comments, just space. It was new, unfamiliar, but it worked. One night I was editing photos in my studio when Haley walked in, holding Eliza. My mother called, she said, sitting beside me. She wants us to come for Christmas. I looked up from my computer. What do you want to do? She rocked Eliza gently in her arms. I think we should go, but with conditions. Such as? We stay at a hotel. We leave when we want to. No unsupervised time with Eliza. I nodded. Sounds fair? She looked at me. You know, I used to think success meant making my parents proud, getting their approval, living up to their expectations. I stayed quiet, let her finish. But now, she smiled softly at our daughter. Now I know success is making choices I can be proud of, loving who I love, protecting what matters. 2 weeks before Christmas, another envelope arrived. This one from Gerald, not a lawyer. Inside was a glossy brochure, his firm's annual report. My photographs were everywhere. Landscapes, portraits, cityscapes, all mine. Tucked into the back was a single note, handwritten in careful script. Hired the best photographer I know. Thought you'd want a copy. No apologies, no explanation. Just that. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't love. But it was something. Respect, maybe. A recognition that I hadn't just survived their war, I'd outlasted it. I hadn't beaten them at their own game. I'd chosen not to play at all. And somehow that made all the difference. The gallery opening was everything I'd dreamed of. Downtown Asheville, warm lights glowing through tall glass windows, art collectors, friends, clients, even old professors wandering among the framed prints of landscapes I'd hiked for days to capture. Portraits I'd waited months to take. Moments that were mine alone, raw, real, unscripted. Haley stood beside me, radiant, with Eliza in her arms. My parents had flown in from Oregon and were chatting with Haley's college friends near the wine table. The space buzzed with laughter, praise, and flashbulbs. Even Gerald and Diane came, quiet, reserved, clearly out of their element among bohemians and art buyers. But they came. Gerald walked up to me halfway through the night, hands in his pockets. "Impressive," he said, nodding at a large frame shot of a desert lightning storm I'd waited 18 hours to capture. "Thank you," I said simply. He looked around. This is success. I know. He didn't argue, just nodded again and returned to Diane, who was holding Eliza gently under Haley's careful eye. They didn't stay long, didn't offer unsolicited advice, didn't try to corner Haley in the hallway. When they left, Diane whispered something to Haley. Haley didn't tell me what it was, but I didn't ask. Some boundaries didn't need to be pushed. As we locked up that night, the last guest waving goodbye, the last bottle of wine gone, Haley leaned her head on my shoulder. "Do you think they've changed?" I paused. "No," I said honestly, "but they've accepted that they can't change us." She smiled. "Sometimes that's enough." That spring, the gallery started turning a modest profit. I hired an assistant, took on a few mentorship clients. Haley returned to consulting part-time, helping nonprofits with environmental impact strategy. Life slowed into something we hadn't had in years. Normalcy. No drama, no ambushes, just days. And every so often we'd get a card in the mail from Gerald and Diane, a birthday note for Eliza, a donation in her name to a local children's charity. Always polite, always neutral, never warm, but not hostile either. It was a cold peace, but peace nonetheless. Then one Sunday afternoon, something strange happened. We were having brunch in town when Haley's phone buzzed. She looked at the screen and frowned. "It's Vanessa," she answered, stepping outside. I watched her through the cafe window. Her face slowly dropped as she listened. When she came back, her voice was low. "It's Owen." He found more recordings from their house. They were buried in a separate file system on the home server. Stuff even Vanessa hadn't seen before. My chest tightened. From when? From before we got married, from years ago, about Thomas, about other people, even some recordings from therapy sessions Owen and I had when we were kids. Wait, therapy sessions? Haley nodded. Apparently Mom recorded them, without consent. Jesus. She was using them to find ways to guide our decisions, patterns, phrases, emotional triggers. It was worse than I imagined. This wasn't just manipulation. This was design, engineering, control in its most invasive form. That night, Owen came over. He was pale, hollow-eyed, carrying a hard drive. "Vanessa backed these up in case something ever happened to the server," he said. "I think we need to listen. All of it." For hours, we sat in the living room, Haley gripping my hand, Eliza asleep upstairs. And we listened. To Diane speaking softly to therapists, manipulating context. To Gerald bragging to friends about keeping the kids in line. To conversations where they discussed my job, my background, my lack of long-term value. It was horrifying. But what struck me most was Haley's reaction. She didn't cry. She didn't yell. She didn't flinch. She just listened, then stood and said, "I'm filing for a legal injunction. They don't get access to us without consent ever again." I want it in writing. Owen nodded. Me too. The injunction was granted within weeks. a formal legal document outlining new boundaries, no surveillance, no manipulation, no recording devices, and no unsupervised time with Eliza until further notice. When the papers were served, Gerald called once. He didn't leave a message. Diane never called at all. But the silence was its own kind of closure. A month later, as we lay in bed with Eliza between us, Haley whispered in the dark, "I think I finally believe I'm free." "You are," I said softly. "No, we are." The day the injunction became official, we didn't celebrate. There wasn't a party, no champagne, no announcement on social media. We just existed, peacefully. I took Eliza for a walk that evening. Haley stayed home, working on a new proposal for a nonprofit she was consulting. The air was crisp. The sky was a watercolor of fading blues and melting oranges. As we walked through the neighborhood, I thought about legacy, not just what we leave behind, but what we fight to preserve. For so long, I'd believed that winning meant defeating someone, proving them wrong, exposing them. But the truth was more subtle. The real victory had been keeping our family intact. Protecting my daughter from the generational rot of manipulation disguised as tradition. Making sure Eliza never grew up believing love was control or that silence was safety. I took a photo of the sky with my phone. No filters, no edits, just beauty as it was. When I got home, Haley was in the nursery reading aloud to Eliza. The soft sound of her voice, the baby's coos, the warm lamplight. It hit me all at once. We'd created this, out of the ashes of deception, out of the wreckage of old expectations, out of broken chains. We built a new kind of family, one rooted in trust, in freedom, in truth. Months passed. We traveled. Haley took Eliza to meet her college friends on the West Coast. I got invited to host a photojournalism workshop in Iceland. We didn't tell Diane or Gerald. They didn't ask. The last message we got from them was a forwarded photo of Gerald holding Eliza at the hospital with the caption, "Grandpa's favorite girl." No context, no request, just a memory they were clinging to. The gallery did well, better than I expected. I got offered a book deal, a collection of stories behind my favorite photos, and I said yes, but only if I could write it my way. No ghostwriter, no PR spin, just the truth. One chapter would be called The Poisoned Glass. I'd change the names, of course, but I'd keep the moment, the flicker of hesitation, the quiet switch, the cold, calculated sip, and the fallout that revealed everything. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about remembering the turning point, the moment I stopped surviving and started protecting, not just myself, but the life I wanted to live. One evening during a storm, we lost power for an hour. I lit candles. Haley wrapped Eliza in a soft blanket and hummed lullabies. We sat together on the couch listening to the rain, and I realized something simple but profound. We were whole, maybe not healed in every place, maybe not perfect, but whole, and that was enough. They say family is forever, but I think that's wrong. Family is earned, built, nurtured. Sometimes it's even chosen, and sometimes it has to be defended. With evidence, with boundaries, with courage, with quiet persistence. So when people ask me about success, I don't talk about magazines or exhibitions or book deals. I talk about this: a warm porch, a sleeping child, a partner who knows the whole truth and chooses to stay. That's the real victory, and it was never theirs to define. It was always ours to claim.